Now, another book that you wrote that we did on our show, and we didn't go through as many as you did. We pulled out a few and talked about it, either ones that spoke to us personally in our walk, or that we thought were going to be really excellent to expand upon. Is your Keeping Faith in the Age of Reason. And what was the catalyst for this? Were you just sitting down for your well, you don't do Feedback Fridays anymore, but I always enjoyed Feedback Fridays on AIG. But in your book Ultimate Proof of Creation has letters to the editor in there as well that I think are there. So you took this kind of big huge chart of alleged skeptics annotated Bible difficulties, and you said, are these contradictions, and what do we do with them? So what was the catalyst for that book?
Yeah, it was an internet list. Well, backing up, there was a project that had been done by Christians where they showed a visual reference of all cross references in the Bible, or at least all that they could find. It was beautiful. It was masterfully done. And then some skeptic took a section of that and said, well, we think these cross references are contradictory. And so they took a small fraction of those and they made another chart. And they had a list of 400 and some, over 400 alleged Bible contradictions. Some of them they duplicated. They hadn't edited it very well. But I said, okay, I'm going to call your bluff. I'm going to go through and examine each one of those, because they would pass this around on the internet. Right. And Christians who are perhaps looking at it will think, well, maybe they didn't get them all, but boy, over 400, surely a few of those have to be right. And I thought, well, I'm going to call your bluff. And I went through and examined each one of them. Not one of them is a legitimate contradiction. Most of them, the vast majority of them, they had simply not read the text carefully. If they had read the text carefully, had given the author the benefit of the doubt, which is what you do when you read a book, then they would not have concluded a contradiction. There were some where they clearly don't know what a contradiction is. A contradiction is A and not A at the same time and in the same sense. Some city names can change over time. Lots of things can change over time, or some cities can have more than one name, and they say, well, here it's called this and here it's called that. Well, yeah, that's because certain, Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb, certain locations can have more than one name. And so most of the contradictions were that nature. There were a handful where I had to go back to the original language and check, because most of us can't read the Bible in the original Hebrew and Greek. We read an English translation. And sometimes it's not been translated perfectly. So there were a few where I had to go back and check, but very few. Right. Most of them, if you just read the text carefully, you would see that they are non-contradictory. So that's my response to that internet list. Yeah. And it still floats around, and I just post my book as a response.
That's right. Oh, I'm going to take this guy down. Oh, okay. I see. I think we said the word bifurcation fallacy a good number of times in the video as well. That's, I think, number 2 for kind of what their issues were. So is your goal then to, in this book, to answer all Bible contradictions completely, or do you expect people kind of to use this as a reference guide, as a touchstone, and say, I don't know what the answer to your question is. I think I have a book that talks about that. Let me go look at it, and then for them to take that and expand upon it with their friend or whatever it might be.
Yeah, more the latter, because people can, as you can see that book, none of those were legitimate. People can make up any alleged contradiction. So I can't anticipate the infinite number of things that people can come up with, the infinite number of irrationalities people can think of. But what I did was I said, here's your best thinkers, and they've come up with this list. Not one of them's legitimate. What does that say about your position? I think that's the goal. That being said, most of the contradictions that people allege against Scripture, the answer's in that book. I mean, it's over 400, and I was able to do that because I'm a fairly concise writer. I tended to give very short answers, except for those that required a longer. I mean, there were a few that required a longer one, and a lot of them were similar to another one. So I'd say, this is a bifurcation fallacy, see number 13 or whatever, and it would reference back to a previous one so you can get more details. So it's not meant to be exhaustive, but it's pretty close to at least those that most people commit.
Yeah, I think we were doing a book, not on this show, but we were doing it together. And Peter Enns was talking about how you can only trust the resurrection portions of the Bible because those lead to everlasting life, which seems odd for Peter Enns to talk about, and he's very vague on it. But he brought up a contradiction, like saying the walls of Jericho fell, and applying it to current understandings of here's this Babylonian pottery. And then you go back and you actually look at the pictures and people who critiqued the kind of the original understanding of, well, it couldn't have fallen at this time. It didn't have the pottery. And if you just look at the pictures and you're like, well, there are walls there and they had fallen. In fact, there's some of them that still look like they have scorch marks on them as well. It's one of those things where you can't always anticipate every alleged Bible contradiction. But I thought this was an excellent resource guide that if we needed to go back to, and I could say, I think I've heard that one before, and you'll provide scriptural support or the logical breakdown as you did, which is usually very helpful, because I don't think a lot of us, unless if we get into college and have a desire for philosophy, kind of have had logic in our life. We think, I'm thinking logical, but not many of us actually mean what we're saying in that. So that's one of the things that I appreciate about your book.